Jack, if you need anything at any time, you just yell at me, we'll get it. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. This is a really special occasion for us. I just want to thank you on behalf of the Carrollton Public Library. Thank you to Tom, the KC Hall, for letting us have this area. We really appreciate it. We couldn't have fit all of you in the library, but we knew this was going to be special. Thank you to the library board, the staff, Ruth Gilbert for making the cake for us. Also, thank you so much to these three gentlemen giving their time to us so that we can ask questions and learn from them. Thank you to all those veterans in attendance today. And if we could you stand for us? Any veterans out in the audience today? I know there's some. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Tomorrow is the 77th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, so it makes today just a little bit emotional for us. You'll notice that some of the Pearl Harbor pictures are on the slideshow we have playing back there. And we would like to have a moment of silence for, that might work. Yeah. I don't know if we can move him again. If we could have a moment of silence for those we lost in Pearl Harbor and those veterans we lost. Thank you so much. And also I'd like to mention that we have refreshments in the back of the room. The bar on the very far side of the KC Hall is also open. And we also have calendars for sale. They are various pictures of history of Carrollton compared with shot today. Now, you guys didn't come here to hear me, I'm guessing. So let me introduce our special guests. We've got John Neece, and we're really excited to have him with us. Today I just met him and I love him. Neal Gillingham, love him already. And Jack Bertman, love him too. So, I think it goes without saying, you guys are pretty special to us and we appreciate this so much. If anyone would like to ask questions, I'm going to start off with a couple. This is your interview. You ask what you like. You can come up, give me the question, I'll relay it to them, or you can simply come up here and ask. But we're going to let them drive it. And of course, at any time, you have the right to skip a question because this is a very emotional thing, and we respect that. And Neal has something he would like to start us off with.
First of all, we're not heroes. The heroes didn't come back. Bravery, here's what General Homer Nelson Bradley wrote. He was from
I don't think they can
over in
hear you.
Missouri.
Neal, I don't think they can hear you.
First of all, we're not heroes. The heroes didn't come back, and these guys will attest to that. Here's what Homer Nelson Bradley wrote. General Bradley was with Eisenhower, and they went through Europe. He said, bravery is the capacity to perform properly, even when scared half to death. And he also said, we have grasped the mystery of the atom and rejected the Sermon on the Mount. That's all I got.
Okay. Okay, gentlemen. We would like to know, why did you join the service? What branch you were in? What you did? Can you give us just a general introduction?
I went into the Air Force. Actually, I went into the as a greenhorn when I went to service. We took infantry basic. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm not used to these things. I might sing. You wouldn't like it. I went into the service in this railroad battalion, took the basic training, plain old infantry basic, and on the bulletin board there appeared an advertisement to aviation cadets was opening, and they needed pilots, co-pilots, bombardiers, navigators. So I took a preliminary examination, passed, and was accepted, and rode a train to Wichita Falls, Texas. What a state to live in. I mean, it actually snowed mud. It was so dusty at the time. When it did snow, it was mud. Anyway, that's Texas. But I took the physical, the psychomotor, which was looking into your head, psychiatrists, boards of psychiatrists, doctors, and this was at Christmas time. And I took all the tests, tough physical, couldn't pass it now. Tough physical, and tough mental too for the times, and they graded half of the papers before Christmas. Well, my name begins with an N, Noble, so I didn't get graded in the first half of the papers, and after the Christmas holidays, the Congress had decided to raise the standard. Well, I passed under the old standard, but I flunked under the raise because it didn't need me. It didn't need that many more pilots and navigators. So, I had a choice of radio, gunner, or armor gunner, that's belts of ammunition and bombs and so forth, or mechanic gunner. And I said, where are the schools? And is that a little better if I'm closer to it? And the schools happened to be Scott Field, Illinois, for radio. Well, I wanted radio if I was going to be at Scott Field. And so I would go to Whitehall on my days off. And there were huge classes of going to be a radio operator. And you learned the Morse code. It took weeks to learn that code. Then it took weeks to get speed up, just like typing. Most of it probably typed. You know, when you started out, A, S, D, F, G, well, it took a while. Well, you finally got up 35, 40 words maybe. Well, we had to get to 35 characters a minute, listening to long and short sounds, radio code. So I went to the school, graduated from that school, and they took I had to blow my horn a little, they took the top 5 men out of, well, the classes were 35 and 40, and then they had 3 shifts a day. When I say 3 shifts, they had a night shift going to school, and an afternoon shift, and a day shift. They were making radio operators. Well, suddenly, they really didn't need that many, but they did raise that scoring on the officers, so I missed that. They called 5 men out of this class and asked us if we wanted radar. Radar, what's that? And I accepted, and I I went to radar school. I said, where's school? Boca Raton, Florida. And it wasn't a very long school. The radio was long, lengthy. But the radar, we had 5 men and 1 instructor. We had a one on 5. And they really poured it on you. And every other day we would get on a B-17 and go to Havana operating this equipment. And 5 men had a mounting of that equipment in the aircraft, and we could all work at once. And one trip down there, the pilots that they used, pilot and co-pilot, they were men who had their missions in Europe. And they sent them home because they didn't discharge them, so they just sent them home, and they were using them to fly these taxi cabs to Havana and back every day. Well, one little interesting thing, you see, you can land a 4-engine aircraft with nothing in it, just some men, a little bit of equipment. You can land it on 1 engine, but you've got to be a darn good pilot to do it. But you can bring one in, set it down, 3-point landing with 1 engine. Okay, we lost an engine one day over Havana. That left us 3 on that 17. The reason the 24 came out, because it had twice the bomb load, twice the gasoline load. That made it have a range, and it had some joke to it when it got to the target. Well, these yahoos that had been to Europe and had their missions in, they lost this engine. So they landed at Boca Chica, which Harry Truman would always use Boca Chica because he'd go to Key West. The little White House was in Key West, wherever he stayed down there. And they couldn't take that aircraft off. They brought an aircraft down for us, and those officers got chewed out for landing that thing. They could have gone on to New York with it. But, and Boca Raton wasn't very far from Boca Chica Naval Air Base. But they wanted to drink, and they wanted to eat with the naval officers. So we were treated with the enlisted men. It was kind of amusing, but they brought another aircraft down, and we went home in it. But they didn't care how much they were eaten out for doing what they did. They didn't care a bit, because they'd been someplace and done something.
So was the majority of your training in Boca Raton?
Boca Raton was the radar.
The radar training?
Yeah. And we took our water safety there. We took over a country club, the government did, took over a club and had a huge pool, and they put the parachute harness on us and pull us up like a windlass or whatever you call that thing. Anyway, a whole bunch of guys would grab that rope and pull you up, and then on signal, they'd let it go. And you would hit the water, and you'd inflate your life jacket. The life raft was in the pool, pretty good sized life raft, and it was upside down. And there was a method on how to get it back on its bottom, and you get in it. Then when you did that, you got out of it, tipped it back over for the next guy. So that was our water safety. And later on, I joined a crew overseas, and each crew voted individually as a crew, will we ditch if we lose 1, 2, 3, or 4 engines too far away, and we have to, or a fire or anything, would we ditch or would we bail out? And our crew voted unanimous to ditch, because we would at least be together. If you bailed out, you might be 25 miles apart by the time you got out of there, and then the life raft, it'd be another 25. And had 2 rifle. So we all voted, we never had to do it, but we voted to ditch, which was, I think, good thinking. And
Well, John, I have more questions for you about that, but in the meantime, Neal, can you tell us where you did your training? And hold that thought, we're coming back. Neal, can you tell us where you did your training at, or where it started?
I went to Chicago after graduation in '43, and we were all, most of us 18-year-olds. But anyway, the day I went to Chicago, all 3 branches were open. You go in the Marine Corps, the Army, or the Navy. Well, I had my brother June had went in just before me. He went in the Navy. Well, as an 18-year-old and naive, I thought, boy, those Marines got the prettiest uniforms. and not knowing anything about war. And that was pretty tempting because everybody was talking about the beautiful Marine uniforms. Well, anyway, you had your choice, so there was three desks, and you go up to the one that you wanted in. It was, all 3 of them were open at that particular day. I stood there a minute before I walked up. He said, "Get up here." I walked up to the Navy table. Already got my first chewing out. I walked out, wasn't even in. I was in. I'd already been in, but I wasn't in in just a few minutes. Walked up to the Navy table and I said, Navy. Well, he knew if I walked up there as Navy. So he said, "Good luck, sailor. Get your so-and-so down." You guys have been in service, you know why I'm going to leave some words out. anyway, I went from there to Farragut, Idaho. Took about, I think, 8 or 10 weeks there, boot camp they call it. And their medical is corpsman. Their doctors are doctors, and the medics are called corpsmen. Well, anyway, they give you an aptitude test, and if you passed, you might get the choice of what you want to be on the ship. Because I was thinking about, I wanted to be, I thought again, I wanted to be shooting them big 16-inch guns off those battleships. That looked pretty exciting to me, but I hadn't been in the war either. But anyway, he put down, "You'll get it, you know how that goes if you've been in the military, yeah, you'll get it, yeah, you'll get it, whatever they want to put you." But anyway, he said, "You got to put it down 2 more." I said, "I don't want 2 more, I want to be a gunner." "I told you put down 2 more. So I said, "Well, what would you put?" He said, "Put down radio operator. You're going to get me a gunner's mate." So I wrote down radio operator. He said, "No, you got to have a 3rd one." I said, "I don't know what to put down." I thought I could get in the gunner's mate. He said, "How about medics or hospital corpsman?" "No, that's the last thing I want. I don't want that." Well, I got my last choice. And Doc, I confess, they would have us standing up there looking down, watching those major operations. That's part of our training, a floor up and a rail all the way around it. And I'd stand there and I can't pass out. What do my buddies think? I came on that rail and I never passed out. But anyway, after about a month, it's just like out here, and every one of you that's got any age on you and all have experienced this. When you don't have a choice, you will do it. And I knew I wasn't going home, so I got acclimated to that. And then it got where it always bothers you to a degree, but it didn't bother me like it did when I was going through that first month. But anyway, I went from there, and the only guy that went to school with me was from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we were the 2 chosen to go to the Marine base at Camp Pendleton, California. You know, a lot of Marines don't like to admit that, but they're a branch of the Navy, and they don't want to talk about that. You guys been in know what I'm talking about. Right, Grant? But anyway, they got their flyers and their hospital corpsmen from the Navy. So I thought, oh good, now I'm back with the Marines, that's great. But once again, I hadn't been to war. But anyway, I was down there about, me and my buddy was down there about, and we were real close. We always went on passes together when we were going through boot camp, or run around camp together, what few passes we had. And down there we ran around together. We worked in a hospital there, and then we worked in the field. Thought we was going over with one of the Marine and glad it didn't, but, but anyway, after a while, after about 2 or 3 months, I got private orders. There was a CB unit sailing, supposed to be right ready to sail for Hawaii, or out to the Pacific. And they cut my orders and they sent me up there. Well, I left my buddy there. He ended up at Iwo Jima with the 5th Marine Division, 50% casualties. And anyway, I went over this CB unit and Hawaii. Anybody going to the Pacific in World War II, if you're ground forces, you trained at least 2 months in Hawaii. I guess to get them acclimated for the jungles down under. Hawaii had jungles in, I imagine out there in all the islands, they probably still got them, but they wasn't as bad as the Pacific jungles, but nevertheless, we went there. And so I'll stop there, so that started me off.
Okay. We want to hear from Jack. Where you trained at, Jack? How you got into the service?
What I just simply read, in other words, when I was first contacted about this program tonight, it was to be held at the library.
Yes.
And it really expanded.
Yes, it did.
So you told me to write about my World War II experiences, which I did.
Okay. Perfect. Do you want me to read it? Or do you want to read it?
I would feel more comfortable if I started, if I got a little emotional. If you would end it, I'd appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely.
We can't hear back here.
The war came in December of 1941. We were sophomores in high school. 2 years later, we were in the military. I was 18 and proud of a thick, full black head of hair. The Army cut off most of my hair. Reminded me that my first allegiance was to the Army and not my own self-interest. The government issued rationing stamps to all households. Each stamp had a limited monetary value that was necessary to purchase merchandise. Cheating on the use of the stamps could lead to fines or jail time. Somebody want to finish that for me?
Oh, okay. All right.
I ran out of gas.
You ran out of gas. It happens to the best of us. We're just glad you're here, Jack.
Thank you.
Okay, where did you leave off? Oh, the use of stamps could lead to fines or jail time. Okay. On the west side of the courthouse yard, employees of the courthouse planted a victory garden, encouraging other people to do the same. Collecting pots and pans and other forms of metal were also collected on the same site. Now, this is what Jack wrote, by the way. This is not something we've copied from somewhere. These are his own words. Civilians bought bonds to pay for the war, raised food, and provided the tools of war. I entered the service in March of 1943, along with other fellow recruits. We were sworn into the Army at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, located in the Chicago area. We were issued clothing, given various vaccines, and assigned to Army posts in different areas of the country. I was sent to Camp Robinson, Arkansas, near Little Rock, for my basic training. Robinson was an infantry base. We were taught how to fire a rifle, a bazooka, a bar, which is a Browning automatic rifle, and how to use a bayonet, handle grenades, and the procedures for using explosive grenades was to pull a pin, hold down the triggering device, count to 3, and throw. Gas masks were quickly donned when we entered a cabin filled with tear gas. I later joined my regular outfit at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. It was the 87th Infantry Division. On a hot summer day, we went on a 30-mile hike with full field pack, which was of course heavy, and when the water in our canteen became too hot to drink, we put pebbles in our mouths to keep our throats moist. Thank you again. I fondly remember the lemonade drink at the end of the hike. It remains the #1 drink of a lifetime. Get this man some lemonade. A division, roughly 15,000 men, is made of small units. I was a member of the 345th Regiment, 1st Battalion, Company A, 1st Platoon, and 1st Squad. Generals commanded the division with colonels, captains, and lieutenants ranked in descending order. Captain, is it William Cromer?
Yes.
Okay, was our company commander. He was later killed at the Battle of the Bulge. In October, we traveled by train to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, close to New York City, to board the Queen Elizabeth, the largest passenger ship afloat, to take us to Europe. Our entire division was aboard the Queen, and we were packed together like sardines. We had no naval escort, as Admiralty felt that by using a zigzag tactic and with the ship's fast speed measured in knots, that an escort was not needed. The gamble paid off as the Elizabeth survived the war. We docked at Greenock, Scotland. Greenock, Scotland? Greenock, Scotland, after a 4.5-day trip through the North Atlantic. Greenock is a shipbuilding community located in a waterway known as the Firth of Clyde. From the high deck of our boat, we saw lush green meadows where sheep grazed amid low stone walls and thatched roof cottages. It was a beautiful, wondrous fairy tale sight. It proved to be in sharp contrast to the sight and sounds that were to follow. From Scotland, trains carried us to a small coal mining town called, I'm going to mess this one up too, Biddulph. Okay. In the Midlands of England. Since 1939, German submarines, known as U-boats, kept certain foodstuff from the British diet. Small children in Biddulph had never seen a banana or an orange. We took showers in the coal mining facilities. They called the miner colliery. Shakespeare's home was not far away. After a short stay in the Midlands, we traveled to a naval part in the southern part of England called Southampton and endured a short, rough trip across the English Channel, which separated England from the rest of Europe and landed at Le Havre, France. Le Havre and other coastal cities and towns were secured by the Americans and the Allies in earlier action that summer. From Le Havre, a boxcar took us to where the action was. Our 87th Infantry Division was assigned to General Patton's 3rd Army. At our final destination, we arrived at an assembly area where we got our final orders and were then sent to the front lines. On our way to the front, we saw large draft horses, similar in size to our Clydesdales, lying on their backs with their legs pointing to the sky. They were probably killed by concussion or artillery fire. As a naive teenager, I did not fully comprehend the significance of my situation. Even though I was scared, I did not spend an overly amount of time worrying about being killed. In our first offensive actions, as the visible tracer bullets from a German machine gun whizzed by, it was a surreal moment because it was hard for me to realize I was actually in combat. It is hard to explain, but that surreal moment quickly passed as the action intensified with the addition of mortar and artillery fire. We returned fire, and later that night I dug a slit trench with my shovel to help escape the continuing mortar fire. The cold night was pierced by the moans and cries of the wounded. They were like sounds of a wounded animal. It was eerie. The medics administered to the wounded as best they could. I particularly remember a soldier of Scandinavian descent was absolutely terrified of combat. He was killed the first day. The Army should not have allowed him to be in that position. Can you get me a napkin or a stack of them? This is a lot harder than I thought. I understand, Jack, why it was maybe tough to read. Thank you. I stared at the first casualty as he lay mute on the frozen snow-covered ground. The burial detail would find him, secure his dog tags from around his neck, and his family would soon, I'm really sorry, would soon learn of the death of their beloved son, brother, husband, or sweetheart. What an uplifting program. Sorry. It just drives home the fact that we are so thankful to have these gentlemen here, and what they have gone through is more than a lot of us will ever be able to fathom. As we walk toward our objective on our first day of combat, we were met with heavy machine gun fire as we watched tracer bullets whiz by. Gunfire and artillery skills continued into the night, where we could hear the screams and sounds of the wounded, and the infantry soldiers lived outside 24/7. My combat service occurred during one of the coldest in recent European winters. The intense cold affected us in so many ways. Jack, if it's crossed out, you don't want me to read it, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Night patrols were frequently sent out to gather information about enemy troop movements or what specific German units were in the area. If a prisoner was taken, he would be brought to division headquarters for questioning. On one such patrol, we met enemy resistance and I was wounded. A medic dressed my wounds and I was sent to a battalion aid station and then to a general hospital near Besançon, France, not too far from Geneva, Switzerland. A plaster cast stretched from my head to my upper arm, and occasionally at night, a lone German aircraft would fly over doing no harm. We called him Bed Check Charlie. At that time, December, the Allies commanded the skies. From Besançon, I went to Marseille, a large port city in the Mediterranean Sea. Other wounded soldiers and myself boarded a hospital ship bound for the USA. It was a happy day. My last destination was Fort Sheridan, where I first entered the Army. I was mustered out of the service in 1946 and given 300 George Washingtons. I was rich. I had been making about $75 a month, and some of it went to my mother. When those missiles from hell were screaming overhead, I grabbed Mother Earth to dig as deep into her bosom as I possibly could. These thoughts were repeated many times, different places. During the Battle of the Bulge, a name given to a battle that started with a surprise German attack in the winter of 1944-45, soldiers of the 87th Division had to endure bone-chilling cold, sleepless days and nights, scarcity of food, no toilet facilities, going days being constipated or having diarrhea, suffering frostbite, depression, and loneliness. This is a Napoleon Bonaparte quote. The first virtue in a soldier is endurance of fatigue. Courage is only the second virtue. My days in combat were limited, and I did not endure long stretches of firefights or experience as many hardships as did many others. On occasion, for years, I have often wondered why I survived, and many did not. Was it purely luck? Did the prayers save me? I count my blessings and often think of those other young men whose lives were cut too short, including my good friend Charles Gears, who at the age of 19 lost his life on a bombing raid over its target in Romania. Whenever I have negative thoughts, I push them aside by replacing them with positive thoughts. This method was used by Nelson Mandela in his long incarceration in South African prisons. Well, Jack, I see why that was tough to read. Okay. Sorry, folks, I'm a mess. That was really intense and very eye-opening. Thank you for sharing that. That had to be super difficult. And on a strictly selfish note, we're going to talk about something just a little bit lighter so I can put my inch of makeup back on. Because I think I'm dripping all over the podium. I probably look like the Bride of Frankenstein here. Can you talk about your friends, your buddies, basically your brothers that you were with, some of the funny things you did, some of the pranks that you would have pulled on each other, and anything that you look back on and could remember fondly, a kindness that you had seen, and any lovely memory.
This gentleman mentioned Boca Chica a while ago. And when we got out of the service, we had a lot of running around to do. And we drank an awful lot of Boca Chica rum.
Jack, would you like me to
John's
give you some
going to tell you about how he wasted a whole load of bombs. The war would probably end quicker if the crew knew how to drop bombs. He can tell you about it. He didn't want to tell this.
I knew he was going to bring that up. This was a D-Day over Iwo Jima. And we only used one radar aircraft to a flight, like 6 or 8 other planes. And of course you were the lead aircraft, which is a bad spot. But we didn't crank the radar antenna down because it was daylight. We were going to do a daylight bombing. The bombardier was going to use the Norden bomb site and drop the bomb. Well, we were supposed to be there X hour, and somebody on the aircraft, on the intercom, not on the radio, we couldn't use it. We should be there by now. Yeah, it's kind of a mystery. And the pilot told me to warm the radar setup and see where we were. And of course, radar, you just look through rain or snow or dark of night or whatever. And it's just like looking in the daytime. And the gunners cranked the waist gunners cranked the antenna down. I had to set warm. My report to the pilot, it's 125 miles behind me. The navigator had missed it. That was a little embarrassing, to say the least. So we turned, we couldn't say anything to the other aircraft because radio silence. So the lead aircraft banked and turned, and everybody turned on us, and we went back. I never saw as many ships in my whole life, and never will again, as coming ashore at Ewo. But it happened to the other islands also. But this one, we were there on the D-Day, and we couldn't drop the bombs. We were low enough, we were about 13,000 maybe, and you could almost visually bombed. But there were GIs down there, and it's kind of a no-no to kill your own men. So we had to keep the bombs, and we flew on out over the ocean. The gunners used their machine guns and to burn the barrels up. When you get them so hot, the projectile comes out of the barrel doing this, no good. So they wanted to get new barrels, and they needed them, and they just locked down on the triggers and burnt the barrels up on purpose. So we got new barrels. But we went out to sea, and there was nothing below us, nothing in the way, and we dropped the bombs. That's what we killed fish. We didn't kill any fish because the pins were still in, the safety pins were still in the bombs. They're still down there.
Now, that's not what I heard.
Just told me that you killed 15,000 fish.
That is
No
erroneous.
wonder you didn't want to tell me that. I heard your story from another person.
I'm telling you like it was.
Is he wrong? You didn't kill 15,000.
We
But you
didn't.
did drop them in the ocean instead of the target, right?
Right, we sure did.
I'll settle for that.
And in my opening remarks, I didn't know how much detail you really wanted. Well, I don't mean, I'm not referring to this now. But you belong to a crew. You belong to an air crew, and there are so many things happen to you and the crew. I think I mentioned to you how we voted the ditch. Well, we never had the ditch. But there were aircraft that did. And a B-24 only stayed up 3 minutes at the most. And it was gone. And you had to get out of there, and you had to get your life rafts out of there. But to repeat for the 5th time, we didn't ditch. We had 24s with 4 good engines. We never lost an engine. And the B-29s that went to Tokyo, they come back to Saipan with 3 engines. If any of you know anything about aircraft, we call them the big 3-engine aircraft because so many of them lost an engine, it just malfunctioned, and it wasn't doing anything. The prop was feathered, here it came in with 3. It was fine with 3. But a right cyclone engine is an aircraft engine, but
Left side. Left side. Right side, but the left side.
where are we? but a right cyclone was the back. Now I get it right. Thank you, Neal. We had Pratt Whitney. Pratt Whitneys didn't quit. They flew. They pulled you. But not a right. And we didn't have to worry about the rights. In the Air Force, you move a lot. Ernie Pyle, who was a reporter, was killed on Hiroshima. And I have a picture of his grave. And he made the remark. He was a ground backer. He backed the infantry and the Marines, the people on the ground. He said the difference between an airman and an infantryman, the airman dies clean shaven. And we didn't stink either. I mean, these are little amusing things I'm telling you, but it's a fact. We had a better living. You just lived better. You ate better. You showered better. You did everything better.
And you never even had to polish your shoes for inspection.
And we respected our officers, but we didn't have to call them sir. We didn't salute them. It was Dick, Tom, Harry. And they called you by your first name, and that's what you did to them. Just the first name. Military courtesy went right out the window, protocol went out the window in the Air Force. I guess that's the only branch that did. What do you want to hear about?
Dr. Turpin will appreciate this one. You talk about you would have laughs, and boy, they were well welcome when you're over there. Anything you laugh at, you laughed at. We had one of our doctors was from Stillwater, Oklahoma, general practitioner, good guy. He really a good guy, but he must have been 60-something, and he had to volunteer. As old as he was, I never had courage to ask him how old he was. But he was really a nice guy, but he couldn't remember before we left the States. We'd have sick call every morning. Did you do that, Doc, when you were in Vietnam? Did you have sick call or every morning?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that was routine, whatever base you're at. Did anybody cut their hand or cold or whatever, you went to the sick bay every morning, and the doctors would tell us what to give them or bandage up or whatever. Anyway, when the guys would come up when we left the States, and he stayed with us all through the war, but when the guys would come through the morning sick call, he'd look at me and say, maybe see him for a week or a month, and he'd say, now let's see, are you the guy with the ear? Or are you the guy with the hand? And of course, us young bucks, we couldn't keep from laughing, not in front of him, but he never could remember from day to day what was wrong with those guys. And to us, that was awful funny, because here we were bandaging their hands maybe for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and doctors would, we had a good surgeon, doctor would go around and tell us what to do that particular day and so forth. But when he pointed at a guy, he'd always say, he'd never say, are you the guy, with the cut hand or whatever? Maybe been coming for a month. He'd say, are you the guy with the ear? Are you the guy with the nose? We even got, when we were overseas there, every once in a while, one of the medics would have a laugh. We'd say, are you the guy with the leg? Anything for a laugh. But anyway, he was a good old guy. And I remember, this was kind of strange, but not real funny. I remember the morning that they dropped the atomic bomb, or when they first heard about the dropping the atomic bomb. He came in there and he said, hey, Neal, he said, it's just been an officers' gathering, and he said, our 29s dropped a bomb on Japan, and it was 20,000 tons of TNT equal to 20. I said, who told you that, doctor? And he said, no, I believe it's true. And I said, they could put 20,000 tons in a bomb. Well, they did. and so about 30 minutes later, it was all over the post that they dropped the atomic bomb. So he was right. He was right. He's a good old guy. I was always going to stop and see him and see if he was still alive in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and never got around to it. Hey, you young people, do what you want to do while you're young, and do those things, because anything you might enjoy, do it. And anyway, that's all I got to say. I can think of some more funny ones about Pastor Jack. You guys have anything funny at all?
Amen.
Jack, would you like me to go get you a rum?
I beg your pardon?
Do you want me to go get you a rum?
Boca Chica.
I feel like I'm hogging the mic up here. This is your opportunity to ask questions. If anyone has a question they would like to ask our gentleman, you're welcome to. And you don't have to speak on the mic if you don't want to, but yes.
Yes, Mr. Bertman, there's something that's been bothering me ever since I was a little boy. How'd you get your nickname?
He wants to know how you got your nickname Boot.
Where the Kroger store is now, there used to be a 3-story building.
Where the Kroger store is now, there used to be a 3-story building.
And my father initiated a Carrollton band which practiced on the 3rd floor. And this particular night was band practice night. And Dad was late getting off to work, so he gave me the keys to open up the hall. So I was 15 years of age, as I remember. I took a lot of time before I got to the hall. My father was the first one that I saw. I was the first one up the steps. My dad was the second one. Boot. True story.
I gotta say real quick, any guy that's been in the infantry, that is the tops, believe me. Whether you're airborne or ground infantry, boy, I looked up to those guys. I saw them, them islands were small, and after you take an island, you would be around all the branches. And the infantry, they really paid a price. The Marine infantry and the Army infantry, I know on Okinawa was 96th and the 77th, and they really took a beating. And boy, they were something. I'll guarantee you. I played in the minor leagues compared to them.
We had about,
I'd like to say one thing. Most people that survive war, a person that's fighting in it. And if he survives, there's chances are that the Army or whatever's made a better man out of it. And I think that's true in my case.
Amen. Amen.
So there are some pluses with war, unfortunately.
Let me add just something to what Jack just said. I agree with you 100%, Jack. It made a better person out of me. I know some people might not think that, but it did. You didn't know me when I was a kid. Ask my sisters. Well, I've got 2 left. There was 11 of us, 11 kids. I had 7 sisters and 3 brothers.
The story about you filling that guy's rain gauge every day.
Oh, no, that wasn't World War II, though.
I know. Mr. Gillingham used to like to alter, was it a neighbor?
Yeah, an old guy lived in the house right on our property.
Alter his rain gauge a bit. For $5, I'll tell you the rest of that story. Anybody else have questions that they would like to ask? Yes?
I have a question for Neal. Yeah. Were you a medic in service?
Hospital corpsman, they call him in the... Now, I've been both. I was in the Army. I went in the Army and I went back... the reason I went back in the reserves in 48 or 49 is I wasn't married and I was only 25, I guess. And Russia, and occupied Poland, Czechoslovakia, and the talk was back then that we'll probably fight them. And so I thought, I never got to go with that. They helped me over in Chicago, take some extra tests. I never got to go with anybody I knew. And I thought, boy, we'll probably call some of us back if they go to war with Russia, already trained and everything. And they had a big army, and most of ours had left Europe, the biggest portion. So I thought, I believe I'm going to join the reserve, and maybe I'll get to go with somebody I knew. Well, it was a Jerseyville unit, and we was at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. The Korean War broke out June 25th in 50. And we was up there in August, and we got our orders, and we'd been recalled on 18th September. And I couldn't get back to medics, not bragging, but to call for so many stripes, and they only even called for one, and I couldn't get back into medics. So I had to learn everything I could about the combat engineers. But, so I was in both. I was both a medic and a hospital corpsman, which is the same thing.
Any other questions for our guests? Okay, I've got a couple. This one always comes up. How was the food? And in our slideshow, by the way, we have some pictures of K rations.
Was he in service?
Yeah.
It depended upon where you were at the time.
I bet.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was miserable. And sometimes you could hardly eat it without throwing it out. But all in all, the K ration were really good. And I don't know, Neal would probably remember those. So out of all the food that we ate, the K rations were probably the best.
How long did you go without eating at times?
I don't know.
Okay.
Wow.
The thing I remember most was in the dead of winter, and it was a really cold winter. And when you had a bowel, I hate to say this, food on the table. But when you had a bowel movement, it stayed with you for maybe a few days or a week. And that added to the misery.
Well, you want to know what I thought about the military food, both Army and Navy? You ever tasted garbage? No, it wasn't really that bad. I mean, like Jack says, some of the meals weren't too bad. And did they always remember you guys at Christmas?
Again, it depended upon where you were at Christmas.
Well, we were pretty fortunate at Christmas. They really seemed like they really got food to us real good, you know. But no, it wasn't too bad. And even though I remember in our training, both Navy and Army, you'd be going to chow and you'd say to the guys coming back, "How was chow?" It's not worth walking there very far. And sometimes, like Jack says, it wasn't that bad. Sometimes it wasn't too good, but anyway, it wasn't bad all the time. And after we got over in the islands, I never heard one guy say how bad the chow was, whether it was K rations or what, because what we saw the Japs do to our prisoners and so forth, it was pathetic. We knew they were starving them. There's pictures there that I brought the guys that I saw some of them after they came out, after they freed out of the Japanese prison. The common statement over there was that everybody thought we'll never see them alive, because when we went into Saipan and Okinawa, the native men would show you an ear the Japanese cut off and handed it to him and laughed. And the way they treated those, you ever seen pictures of those women that they were told how brutal we was going to be? They said we were kind compared to those Americans. And have you ever seen the pictures of women jumping off the high cliffs with the babies in their arms because they was afraid of us? It happened. I got pictures of that too.
I can vouch for that. I don't know how to do. But one night on Saipan, we were scheduled for a mission, and you took off about 2 a.m. because you had a long ways to go to get to the island you were going to bomb, and we did bomb. We didn't kill all of it. Anyway, we were taking off, and you took off with every ounce of power you had, because you had every bit of load on there that you could get. You had your men, you had your extra gasoline, you had the bombs, and you didn't just take off like a Piper Cub, you know, and a little light aircraft. And on this time on Saipan, there was a hill down at the end of the runway, a little ways off, because Saipan was rough. Some of the islands were a lot didn't have the hills on. All of a sudden, I was back in the waist. The waist is back of the bomb bay, where the bombs and the extra gas is carried. If you went far enough, you had to have bomb bay tanks, gas tanks. And anyway, we felt back in the waist and tail section, we felt a lurch, like that. And we knew we had hit the ground. Well, the back half of that, rear half of that aircraft hit the top of that hill. And someone on the intercom told the pilot, "Hey, Bat, you hit the top of that hill, we felt it." "Oh," he said, "we didn't hit it, we didn't hit it." "Oh yeah, okay." So we flew, we were gone probably 10 or 12 hours. It was long, they were long missions, a lot of them, and they weren't built, they weren't C-47s, they were B-24s, and they had aluminum seats, and I sat on a parachute, and it was not comfortable, but when he recovered from, well, he didn't have to recover from hitting the top of that hill, but we made the trip, dropped the bombs where they belong, and
Fish or?
no fish, people, installation. And, you lose your own train of thought, and I was an engineer. I had to lose your train. The engineer, when an airplane takes off, if it has a tail skid or a wheel, that retracts back up into the fuselage. Okay, our B-24s had a tail wheel that if it tilted too soon, it wouldn't tear the rear end up, and it would keep you from having a crash. The engineer, the crew chief, when we landed, they put the tail wheel down. Just before you land, you drop the wheel. He ran to the rear of that aircraft and grabbed some sod that had stayed in there that whole trip and waved it under the pilot's nose and said, "You didn't get the top of that hill, eh? What's that?" Because the Seabees had made the airstrip and all the parking revetments out of coral, and there was nothing growing. And so he proved that he hit the top of that hill.
We have another question from the audience. Did you write home? Did you receive letters from home? How were they delivered and how often? And I'm sure this probably depended on, again, where you were located.
Yeah, we had pretty good mail service. The Air Force, you had a camp and you had an airstrip, and you stayed there a little while, not long. Of course, you moved to another. Well, while we're on that subject, the Air Force moves. You had to you cleaned something up, and you went to a new area, and I got 6 battle stars because I was in 6 different campaigns. Where an infantry division, they might just have 1 battle star, lost more men, went through more, HEWQ really went through it. But we ate well, we got our mail.
Were you married or had a girlfriend when you?
We had 1 married man on the crew, everybody else was single.
Oh.
Because we went back to the Hawaiian Islands one time, while they were moving us from to Okinawa, from Angkor in the Palaus. And another one of those moves, and we'd moved 3 times, and we went over to Maui, Hilo rather, the island, to eat a steak and get our flying time in for the month, or we'd lose 50% of base pay. So the pilot went down, checked out the aircraft, we got on and went over to the island of Hawaii. And there was Mauna Loa down below us, the big crater, the volcano that about every 15 years it'll belch a little smoke or whatever. Not too much lava, but anyway, the pilot looked down at that. He said, "How'd you like to fly around down inside that thing?" Oh, we all wanted to do it. Can you believe we were one lone aircraft? We went down into that crater and flew around. It's about 2 3/4 miles across, if you look it up on eBay or whatever you look at. Anyway, I could see from my little window where my equipment was, I could see that rim. We were that, and we had no idea how the air currents were, whether they were downdrafts, updrafts, no drafts, or what. I mean, we flew up over the side of that, over that rim, went down that mountain, and B-24s were redlined at 280 knots. We were going 310 down that mountain and died. And I looked out my little window, and the wingtip, which was way out there, was moving about 11 inches, I estimated, doing that. And I took a ride over to Springfield last August or July, you know, and they had the aircrafts over there. And I'd been on 3 of the 4 that they had there, different types of aircraft. But anyway, those wings, I looked out that window and they were just as steady like they generally were. And the tail, I think the biggest kick I got out of that whole flight was to look at that twin tail. And it just stood there like that. But when we were going down that mountain, and nothing stayed still. But we had fun. You didn't know that. I got more about it.
Oh, verify that. No, you don't have to make up anything if you've been there. You've seen quite a few things and so forth. Even I did. But anyway, what was your question?
Did you write home?
Oh,
Did you receive
yeah.
letters from home?
Well, I don't know how it was in Europe. I never did think I asked. Maybe Jack can tell us. After you left Hawaii, you could say you were in Hawaii. And somewhere in Hawaii, or training, we went from the west coast to Hawaii, trained there a couple of months, and then went on down. But anyway, after you got down in the South Pacific, you had every letter was read. You didn't seal it. You left it open. They warned you if you wrote anything about where you were or anything about the war. I don't care how minor it might be. They'd warn you once, and then they said the second time you're going to face a court-martial, and that meant the break time. So you left every letter open. You couldn't have a camera. 9 o'clock, you were after they got tents into us. You zipped your mouth. You slept under a lot of mosquito out there. In fact, my outfit, my battalion, whole battalion was at Guadalcanal. I caught them the second time out. And very few guys' outfits came home until the war was over, unless you're wounded or killed. They had so many casualties because they were older experts. The CBs were top welders, carpenters, everything, just what the military needed. They worked on every branch of, they transferred the tanks and everything. Did a lot of clearing and bulldozer on those islands and so forth. But anyway, you very dull letters. Well, Mom, I got my work the other day and I swam in the ocean. And, you know, it's still 115 out here and it rains every day. Boy, those were interesting letters. But you wanted them to know that you were still alive, I guess. So anyway, I hadn't had any mail for about, I'd say maybe a month. And I got to Okinawa and I had 64 letters waiting for me. Boy, that was nice. I probably read them 4 or 5 times. But anyway, that the mail service was pretty good, but you could write free mail, or if you wanted to pay, you could do it out there, you could send them by airmail. But you never had any money. What do you need money for out there? I mean, there were no stores. I got to tell you a real quick one on a little girl. This was cute. About 3 or 4 years ago, I met this guy from another town, and I knew his dad. And I knew his dad was about my age and was in World War II. We knew each other years ago. This little girl we was talking about, this guy said to his daughter, he said, Mr. Gillingham was in World War II like your grandpa was. And she said, oh, where are you? And she was about 7, 8 years old. And she said, can I ask you a question? And I said, honey, you can ask me anything you want to. I'll try to answer. She said, what did you miss the most when you were over there? I said, well, of course, naturally you missed your friends and your mom and dad and the good times you had and pretty girls and so forth. But anyway, I said, what I missed is we couldn't get toothpaste for a long time. I said, you always had your toothbrush, but you couldn't get toothpaste. And I said, but that wasn't important. When we landed on Okinawa, the important thing in Saipan, the important thing was that we had plenty of ammunition, something to eat, and plenty of medical supplies. Other than that, we weren't too concerned about anything else. The brush and the Colgate could wait. Anyway, I don't know how long we went before we got any toothpaste, but we would brush our teeth just with water and so forth. But she thought that. She said, could you go to the store and get some? I said, well, we could probably caught a ship to China about 2,000 or 3,000 miles away and got some, I guess.
Ask Jack about letters home.
I remember this is a true story involving Christmas. World War I. 2 opposing sides. Christmas Eve. In between the 2 opposing sides, there was no man in lands. Soldiers from each side on Christmas Eve went over to the trenches of the enemy and enjoyed Christmas Eve. And the next day they came back and started killing each other. Human behavior is strange how it comes about that. And there's another story I wanted to tell it too, if I can remember now. Maybe later.
What's any more stupid than a war? That is so stupid. I just got where I couldn't follow the news with the boys in Vietnam coming back with legs off for what? What lasted 7, 8 years? And we're a powerful nation, and you put them through that, and then Stan Roberts' boy, it was career. They sent him over there to Afghanistan and Iraq and those places 8 times. And then they wonder why those kids come back with their minds spoiled. Figure that one out. And it always got me whenever they said that the kids in Vietnam in combat shot drugs. Well, I say, what do you do when you're hurting, mental and physically? Was it wrong? It was 100% wrong. If you haven't been there, you can't imagine what it's like. Now, that doesn't give them a right to use it, I agree with you. But you know what our guys did when we had an island? If they had a few minutes off, they was trying to find Japanese booze. That's awful. But I can understand why they did it. And some of my best friends ended up alcoholics. But I never forgot it.
I want to take a moment to thank the audience. I'm thrilled to see this many people. I thought we were such great people. The interest that you show and have proven to veterans that were in the Great War. And thank you for coming.
I want to know how many medals and awards you received.
I can tell you.
She would like to know how many medals and awards you received.
Well, I got 6 battle stars and some ribbons. I don't even know what they meant. I never did send. You could send the awards and then you get the actual medal. but I never did get them. But I was after the points. We came home on a point system, and each battle star was 5 points. So, and I had 6 battle stars. Well, that swelled the points. You had to have about 80 or 70 to get home, and I had too many points. I didn't need them.
Neal, did you have?
I only had one invasion Okinawa on the record. I didn't say I wanted any more, but I only had one because when I got out there, I guess sometime in '44, I didn't know where we were. I didn't know whether it was Tuesday or Saturday. It didn't mean anything. And I actually think if I had to guess on something, I would have said we were doped or something to go through some of that. I thought we were doped. And I converted to, it's just a bad dream, just a bad dream. I'll wake up one of these days, and I had it easy compared to some of these guys. I had it easy, and yet it was that bad at times. But anyway, the anticipation of wondering what's coming next to get to you. And I wondered if I was the only one that thought that until I looked up the Air Force in England. Jim Banghart's dad was a good friend of mine. He was a tail gunner on a bomber. And they said when they'd go on their mission, maybe it'd just been in London the day or two the night before. And the next morning early, they're going on a mission over Europe. And he said, you see the white cliffs of Dover leave you? And he said, anticipation was killing us. But he said, when those first German fighters came on and we forgot about that. We're ready to fight. But that anticipation, and I don't know about these guys, I had the same feeling that going into something that they were sending us into to pick up some bodies or whatever, I had the same feeling until I got there. And then I was ready to work. And I remember one time going down, they sent us down a river plane or a seaplane crashed. And trapped 15 of them on there, and they all drowned, they couldn't get out. And we were sent down there just to haul the bodies. We took them to a certain point and so forth, you know. But just something different, it was similar, but it was different. And I remember that buddy of mine that was on a bomber, he was a tail gunner. He came home and he started losing it, thinking about what he'd been through, I guess. And they took him to VA and they locked him up. And they could look through like they do prisoners. They look through the glass to watch him. And you're a tail gunner and you're back there by yourself. And they said he tried to claw those walls off, trying to get out of there. That's horrible. That's horrible. I saw nothing compared to some of those guys. Everything I've got, it's not about me, it's about what the guys did that you can't believe what they did. When those pilots got to England, I remember, I got black and white, I got a lot of film. I'm a history buff. When they first landed in England, Colonel told them, this one group that made it through, except the tail gunner, told them that you only have to fly 25 combat missions over Germany. That was those early daylight raids. But then he told them, 2 out of 3, I'm not going to make 25. How'd you like to be told that? You got a 1 in 3 chance, we're going to tell you up front. Okay. So, said we looked at each other, you know, and said, the war's over for you if you can supply. The only outfit I ever heard when they told them the war was over for them, if you can survive 25 missions. I got it on film if anybody ever wants to see it. But anyway, he said, that day there'd already been a 200-plane raid. They checked us in that day, and we were, of course, in the bank. I just got there that day. And they said, guys had been over there about a month. It was on a 200-plane American raid. And they said, we counted when they came back. 67 of them didn't come back on that first mission. And these guys survived, so now they're telling the story. And they must have been 40 years old. They went around, they worked in different places in the United States, and they got every one of them. They were still alive. Except the tail gunner, he died over there. And they said, we looked at each other when we counted those planes, 200, and so only 67 of them didn't come back. He said, where do they think that we took Bath? We can add and subtract better than that. 67 out of 200 out of 1 mission, and they tell us we've got a 1 in 3 chance of flying 25. But anyway, they were lucky. They came back.
Did you pass that?
This tail gunner, these tail gunner, they naturally they caught on immediately, and they helped him. They caught on immediately that he was reflecting back to being in the tail of that plane, all those missions and so forth, and they had medicine that helped him.
Some of you may remember Francie Newbauer used to be sheriff.
Yes.
And he was in the service. And he continually went to mail calls. Never got a letter. Finally, this one day, they call his name and he hurries over. What had happened, he had sent a letter to his cousin. They couldn't find his cousin, so the letter came back to him. As a sheriff, Francis' philosophy was, you don't try to get people into trouble, you try to keep them out of trouble. I got the Purple Heart, by the way.
You done?
Do we have any other questions from, yeah, yes ma'am?
Uncle Neal, I have to correct you. We were talking amongst us. Your mother wrote to our dad, John, and you every day.
And why?
Every day, your mother sent you and our dad, John, a letter.
Every day she sent
Every day.
Every day.
you
Yeah,
and John
one
a
day.
letter?
Yeah, she told us kids that when we were little.
One day, I hadn't written for a while, and it was really working us, especially when we first went in. I read where this one CB unit in I didn't know there's any in Europe, but they had a few CBs in North Africa and Italy. And this one, its official report, this one unit, the battalion went in there, CB battalion, they worked for 30 straight hours, several times, to get hospitals set up and so forth, and the necessary things they had to do. 30 straight hours without sleep. And you just adjusted yourself, whatever you were facing, you just adjusted. And as every one of you know out here, if you've got any age on you know, that when you know you don't have a choice, you will get it done.
Good thing we don't get on railroading. I've had a whole bunch of railroad stories.
Look out. Any other questions from the audience?
Have Dad tell him about the day he got home. He came home
The day you got home
in San Francisco.
in San Francisco,
Oh, the big
day,
I
He said,
got
"How
it in
Dad?"
San Francisco. Oh, that one?
the day you got home in San Francisco.
From San Francisco.
This is kind of funny too. I always look for laughs, and if guys know me real well, I'm always laughing at something or telling something and so forth. My wife said, "Yeah, you've told that 500 times." And my son Dave helps me. He says, "Dad, Mom, but it's still funny." But anyway, me and my buddy, the closest one I ended up with, I didn't go with anybody. I ended up with a boy from West Point, Illinois. How many's ever heard of West Point, Illinois? I know Hendricks have, because they lived up in that area. 6 miles from Bowen. Well, anyway, Frank McPherson was his name. And anyway, while we got into San Francisco, came home on the same troop ship, about 3,000 troops on there. Took us 12 days from Okinawa. And I think our dad averaged about 7 miles an hour. I don't, but anyway, all the radio told about coming back was trouble with Russia, trouble with Russia, trouble with Russia. And we sat on the ship, hope they don't turn this thing around before that war breaks out, and take us back to Okinawa. We actually were scared that they might. But anyway, we hit San Francisco, and that morning, instead of, there was Treasure Island, that morning, when you could get a ride with anybody, if you had a uniform on World War II, anybody pick you up in the States. They knew you were probably safe. But anyway, we got in with a drunken sailor. He had a Model A. And he was going from Oakland to San Francisco, and he opened that thing up. And I thought, boy, it'd be nice to get killed now, wouldn't it? And anyway, Frank was sitting in the middle, and I said to him, we got to get out of here. And he passed everything on the road. You've never seen anything more stupid than a drunk sailor driving a car. So anyway, Frank said, see those lights down there? The building was closed. It about 200 or 300 yards. You could see the neon lights. He said, yeah, what about it? And he passed the car. He said, we're going to meet some guys there. So the guy said, got close, and he said, that place is not even open. Well, he's supposed to be here. You don't save your life, you will lie once in a while. But anyway, we got the next car picked us up, and we went on into San Francisco. First place we headed for was where we could get a malted milk. We hadn't had fresh milk in 18 months. So we walked in this restaurant, and you know how they used to have them big tall ones, and they put them on the spinner, or on the thing. Well, that's what we remembered. So we walked in this restaurant, and Frank and I said to this girl, Frank did too, I said, bring us 2 malted milks apiece. She said, you mean one apiece? No, we want 2 apiece. And she said, you realize how big they are? Yeah, how big they are? I said, well, I remember how they used to be. She said, well, they're still big. And I don't think you want 2 of them. Frank spoke up and said, we haven't had any fresh milk in 18 months. We want 2 apiece. She just shook her head, and we drank 2 malted milks.
How do you follow that?
You cannot talk back. Could any of you?
And as of my career, as of yet, this is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. I don't even know how to handle it. Any other questions from the audience? Anything at all?
I just have one comment.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
War has strange results. As a result of my service in World War II, I got tuition paid for 4 years to go to college, became a teacher, I have a pension. So war, in a strange way, was good to me. It's kind of sad to say, but in an indirect way, it's true.
Another thing,
To me, I don't worry about things unless they're really important. I got that out of it. I don't really care whether that letter got mailed or not. If I didn't forget it purposely, it'll get there. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? You know, when I went back to the service, I knew personally 2 guys had been in the Bataan Death March. And anyway, I said, well, why would you sign up all the torture and everything you went through in the Bataan Death March and prison for 42 months? 34% of our boys died in Jap prison camps. 4% died in German prison camps. And I said, why would you take the chance and make it a career after going through all that? They said, what can they do to me that's worse than what I've already faced? And they said, they're pretty good to us too. They kind of realize that some of us paid a pretty big price to be here. And said we didn't ask for that, but they're extra good to us. And but anyway, if I got anything out of it, is I care about people that's got cancer and my friends that die and stuff like that. But whether that letter got mailed yesterday or not, I never give it a second thought. What are they going to do about it? The only time I'm afraid of anything is if I had to face a gun and a knife, then I'll dance for you if you want me to. But otherwise, nothing bothers me.
well, war does mature you pretty quickly. And Neal mentioned about being scared or something about being afraid a while ago. I thought, yes, I agree. Everybody had times that we were scared. Can't help yourself. You're just scared.
If you weren't. We've got about 15 minutes left with these gentlemen. Any other? I have questions, but I want to give you guys the priority. If there's something you would like to ask, you're more than welcome. Okay, one of my questions is, where were you during Pearl Harbor? Do you remember that day? Where were you and what were you doing?
I was at church that morning, and I got in my dad's automobile and turned the radio on. That's where I heard it. You'll never forget where you are with something like that. You knew where you were when you heard about Kennedy getting shot. I mean, you just don't forget things like that forever anymore.
Well, every Sunday, there's an old guy by my name, Harry Odie, was a good friend of my dad's. He's all about the same age. They knew each other from the time they was a kid. My dad was raised in Hay Press. My mother was raised in Walker, Martha Walkerville. And when he retired from the railroad, by the way, he worked on the railroad, he came to Carrollton. And he became paralyzed, and he'd hire me, or he'd ask me to take, he'd always give me money. I didn't care about getting paid, but he would always give me money for taking him on Sunday. He always wanted to go on Sunday. He always had a new Ford. And that was a pleasure, you know, and during the Depression, we were driving trucks at 14, so that was a pleasure to get driving a new car. Anyway, that Sunday, we went out to his brothers in West Ohio. Odie's, did you ever know any Odie's?
Cleveland?
Yeah, that's his brother.
Cleveland.
Okay, so we'd been out there that Sunday afternoon. We was coming back, and the radio came on about Pearl Harbor. Well, I knew who Warrior. I had an idea where a Warrior was. I don't know whether I'd ever heard of Pearl Harbor or not. And boy, I got home and I started asking questions. And then, of course, you saw the next morning the president speaking and declaring war on Japan. And I saw some of that when I went to Hawaii. I saw some of that destruction still over there. But I didn't know 2 boys from Hillview were buried on it. And by the way, Lloyd Brandon and Vincent Thomas, I got a picture here before they left the States of their marriage. They both got married on the same day. There were 2 Hillview boys. They're buried on Arizona, the 1100, I think it's buried on there. These 2 boys, you go to Hawaii and visit Arizona and look up their names, Brian Thomas. And this is a picture of their the marriage. They married sisters.
That's where the Legion.
That's before they went to Pearl Harbor.
That's where the Legion post got its name.
The Hillview Legion post is named Brad Thomas Legion. Yeah. Of course, I didn't know when I was over there that they were on there during the war. I mean, and what would be more sad? Them guys said SOS by knocking on that internal of that ship and they couldn't get out. What'd be more horrible than that? Boy, I tell you, not me, but some of them guys paid a price. They paid a price. They paid the ultimate price. But even the guys like Jack knows that what they went through, it's unbelievable. I know. I was having to patch some of them up. I know how they went through. One thing about it, if we landed on an island, because most of them were small islands, we set up our tent the first day. The CB set up our tent the first day. They'd go in right up to the Marines and start working and fixing the airfields or whatever. And anyway, we'd stay there and we'd go out and get our casualties, or they'd bring us, and we'd stay in that one plot. Every island would sit the same place. As soon as it came in, it's real close to the harbor, they'd set up our hospital, and that was it. But Jack, what do you remember? December 7th? I'm sure you do.
We were sophomores in high school, and you'll remember. And I was working at Allfellows grocery store on the east side of the square, 2 hours on after school and 8 or 10 hours on Saturday. So I think I was working at Allfellows grocery store when we heard December the 7th, 1941, and that we were at war. So yes, I can remember where I was. But another thing I remember, my dad was killed in a freak automobile accident on the square 3 weeks after that. So that's been kind of indelible in my head too.
I well recall the day that his dad was killed. I well recall that. What a sad day.
It's bad to be the senior man. I'm older than either one of them.
How old is that?
96.
He's 96.
Well, you old man, I'm only 94.
And Neal is only 94. Jack, you're 94 also, correct?
I'm the pup, 93.
He's 93.
I just turned 94.
93.
Any other questions from the audience? Something that I've always been curious about, and my grandpas would not talk about this, is what was it like reacclimating yourself to daily life here? I mean, that has to be hard whenever you're overseas and you're constantly on guard. Your life is completely different and turned upside down, and you're living that way 24/7 for however long you're in the service. What is it like when you get back home and you're trying to live quote unquote normal life again? Was it difficult? What were the things you remember being difficult?
I don't know, I've been back home so long, I forgot all about it. But, well, I still pass the driver's test, no glasses, and they don't ball me out for anything, no restrictions. I guess I'm very fortunate.
Well, I couldn't believe when we landed in San Francisco, even though we saw the buses and everything that those islands didn't have, and like I say, plenty to eat and so forth. Until I actually got home, I couldn't believe I was going home. And I went into Alton on the train, and my parents were there to meet me, and my two youngest sisters, Darlene, she's here tonight, and Joanne. And I asked Darlene, they came running up with all the cards, I don't know how many troops are on there going home, veterans going home. And I asked Darlene, I saw them coming, and when the two girls got up to me, I said, "Who's this girl?" I didn't even remember. She went from childhood to young womanhood. I didn't remember. I hadn't seen her in 2 years, and I didn't. You remember that, Darlene? And then another thing, how did I enjoy it? When I found out I was really home, well, on the island there was no stores, and in wartime, if you're over there long enough, you get a stripe about every 6 months. Well, it wasn't good paying. I think we started out with Jack, maybe $40 a month? 50? Huh? I forgot. Well, I looked it up. I think it's 40 or 50 a month. But and then you get promotion, you get about $10 more a month promotion. And the guys that got the congressional honor, if they were still over there, they got extra $5 a month on their check. And so forth. Boy, they really paid us good. But anyway, we weren't there for that purpose. We cared about our country. And the kids today that's in there, thank them. They're keeping us free. They're as important, maybe more important than we were. And another thing, when that war broke out, I'd say 95% of the Americans were behind us. Women went out of their houses and never worked out of their house, 45, 50, 55 years old. I know it. I saw it down at home. And made shells and so forth. And did you know that in Wisconsin, Dearborn, Wisconsin, Ford built a plant that turned out a B-24 Liberator, 1,200,000 parts every 55 minutes. Look it up. Look, Dearborn, Michigan, B-24s.
I got something to say about that B-24. There were 85,000 so many hundred B-24s put together, manufactured in this country. That's the highest number of one kind of aircraft that's ever been manufactured in this country, or any country probably. Fighters, you think there'd be more fighters, but of the certain type aircraft, B-24 was the most mass produced. And they only cost about $250,000. And look what one would cost today.
Did you ever hear of the Ploys to oil field radio?
Yes, yes.
I lost a good friend on that.
Charlie Gears?
Right. There was a navigational screw-up that led to some of the casualties. And that was right over Romania.
What was that again? What was that again?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
What was that again? We missed it.
This is a person by the name of Charlie Gears that was killed on an air raid over Ploys to
Oh, okay.
Romania. It was an oil refining outfit at the time. His plane, by the way, there were heavy guide wires cemented to the floor, and at the top were balloons. And these steel cables were tough. His plane hit one of the cables, rode the cable up, and exploded. And that's what killed Charlie.
Now, you were talking about Palesti, weren't you?
Yes.
Blasted Romania.
That was the worst.
I've got a picture of Charlie Gears. I mean, I've got a plane that was on the picture, and I got Charlie Gears' name on it and his crew over there on the table. That's what the good stuff of the computers can do. And anyway, I love history, all kinds, not just war. You can't like war. I mean, but you gotta, it's history, so it can be pretty interesting. But anyway, yeah, that was a bad one. I think I was 200 plane raid there, Jack. From what I've got, the information I got, 67 of them didn't come back. When they bombed Treetop Heights, they thought they'd pull something different and it didn't work. Germany got 75% of their oil from Ploesti, Romania, so they wanted to take it out.
I think he wanted to add something to that long ago. I thought you wanted to add something to that.
I was going to just add that Palesti was, I believe, the worst target to fly and try to bomb, or even try to get out of there. I had one little thing. We had a commander, we had a squadron commander. He was a full chicken, full colonel. And just before I joined that group, the bomb group, some of the planes were taking evasive action just a little bit too soon before the bombs were away. Well, that was for naught. The trip was for naught if you didn't bomb it the way it's supposed to be. And this colonel said, I'm going to fly tail gun position of the lead aircraft. And if I see somebody pull out for evasive action, as soon as your bombs were away, you saved your own, you saved yourself. Had to clean that one up. But anyway, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. But he wrote that position. Now, whether he would have fired on his own aircraft, nobody knew. And so nobody broke the bomb run until after the bombs were away and no fish involved either. Back again to this audience, I've never witnessed an audience as nice and paid attention and were so cooperative as you all.
Jack, I wanted to ask you what it was like to come back to Carrollton.
You mean after my war service?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was it like to, after you had seen seen combat, what was it like to come back to Carrollton and try to live a normal life?
The government gave, we returning veterans, we call it the 52-20 Club. 52 weeks, we got $20 a week. So for about a year, we were living in hog heaven. And did a little bit too much palling around.
No.
So that ended. So anyway, just to be home after in combat is just an experience you really can't put into words.
No.
I'm sure.
Neal would agree with that.
I agree with that 100%, Jack. Jack and I graduated together. Jack was a great, real good baseball catcher. Catcher? Yeah, okay. I want to make sure I get the right position. Yeah, he was. He was a very good baseball catcher. But I was a better basketball player. If they would have had baseball in high school, he would have been one of the top players.
I tried out for the St. Louis Browns.
He tried out for the St. Louis Browns.
What did you try out for?
That was a whole color. But anyway, I actually had one kid say to me when the war ended, we knew we were going home. He said to me, we were like family. 1,000 men was our strength, 1,076 to be exact. Yeah, you had guys, a few come in and a few go out, but we didn't have too many killed or wounded. In our own outfit, we took care of a lot of guys. In fact, we had a fighter air base about a mile up the road from us, and we took care of all of them and gave all the shots. I got to tell you a quick story like that. One day, we was giving shots, and we always gave this air base shots, and they came through, and I had a new medic, and I said, I'll give the shot, you keep the syringes in front of me. So he did, and I hit this one Marine, and I guess I hit his bone, I don't know. Did you ever do that, Doc? I guess I hit his bone. He was the only one that ever complained that when I gave him a shot that it hurt, and I'd give hundreds of them before that, get toward the last part of the war. And he immediately cursed me, and he said, where in the H are you from? And I said, Illinois, and I'd keep working. You know, 5 on each side, then we had about 12 medics, and you got to keep working. And he stepped around the line, I had this recruit working with me, and stepped around the end of the line, and he was still mad, and he said, you said you're from Illinois? And I said, that's what I said, and I'm still working. And he said, whereabouts? And he said, I'm from Sherman or someplace north of Springfield. I said, Carrollton, Illinois. He said, anyway, would you believe I went to work for my brother after the war before I went to the bank, and we was, my brother took a load of diesel to Campsville, and the state was working on the landing there, 3 or 4 state trucks. And he said, pretty soon, I went and took a load to Root House that day, I well remember. We came into the plant about the same time to reload. He said, you know, I've been over to Campsville, and he said, I had the strangest thing happen. I said, what was that? He said the state was working there, and the guy came over my truck, and he says, I see Gillingham Oil Company. He said, I didn't remember, I thought that was his name. Now, this was about 10 years after the war, before I went to the bank, 8 years maybe. And he said, I thought, well, I believe that was the name. I know it was Carrollton. And he said, he asked me, he said, did you have a brother that was in the medics and the corpsman in the Pacific in Okinawa in World War II? He said, yeah, my youngest brother. He said he gave me a shot once, and he hurt my arm. Can you believe that? Can you believe that?
I'm going to tell one little quick railroad story. Generally, any good railroad story is worth listening to. But do you remember, anybody in the room remember when they would go down to Hardin and get cars of apples? And they had that line that out here north of Carrollton, there was a little Y. You could turn your engine and you go down to Hardin and pick up apples. You'd take empties down and pick up the apple. Well, I wasn't in on this, so I can tell. They called this crew. They had empties to deliver down there, and to pick up the loads. The crew all got drunk, and they left the loads and brought the empties back, and they had to run the thing the next day.
You sure that wasn't fish?
No, that was not fish. Some of apples and oranges. I'm in large with him. Pity me? No, he's good.
Do we
I'm
have,
not afraid of him, he's too old.
Right?
do we have any World War II wives here tonight? Do you have anything you would like to, you of course do not have to, because I'm putting you on the spot. Do you have anything you would like to add about what your life was like, waiting for him to come home?
I did not know him until he came home.
She didn't know him until he came
But
home.
I can tell you one thing, he
Yes.
never liked to talk about war.
He didn't want to talk about it.
But one thing, he had an attack of appendicitis as they were on their way to Berlin. And there was no hospital that could operate.
He had an attack of appendicitis when they were on their way to Berlin, and there was no hospital to operate.
So they left him in a railway station in Belgium.
So they left him in a railway station in Belgium.
And an old man came every day and brought him a little cup of soup.
And an old man came every day and brought him a little cup of soup.
And he survived.
And he survived.
And I don't know how many times we took him to the hospital with attack of appendicitis and he died with his appendix.
Wow.
He died with his appendix. Did you catch that? Oh, he wants to respond to that. Strictly fish diet.
Hey, Claire?
He was on a strictly fish diet, so.
Well, those remarks came from one of the finest families in this area. And those people are great friends of mine, and they're great friends to all of you, too. And that Stanley, I worked with Stanley on the railroad. He was in a different part of the service than I was, but we worked with the same companies, and he was a wonderful worker. Just 110%. That's just what he was. I couldn't pass that up, Stan.
I imagine if people are ready to go home.
I think so. Yep, we've only gone about 6 or 8 minutes over. Gosh, thank you. It doesn't seem to cover it. Thank you for this opportunity to ask you these questions. Mr. Gillingham, Dick, it was suggested to me to let you close us in prayer. Are you okay with that? Would you like to do that?
That's fine.
You don't have to. We're putting you on the spot. Thank you guys so much for coming out here tonight. Thank you for supporting these gentlemen. We hope that you feel the respect and the importance we place on you and our affection for you. Thank
I couldn't believe the number of people and the kind attention. It was a thrill, really. And I've done some public speaking, and this was the best.
You're loved. Thank you, sir.
You know, a night like tonight, it's cold out. Just want to thank God for giving us all warm homes. A lot of people out there really not too far away that don't have enough to eat. So I want to thank God for the food on our tables. A lot of people out there that all they have is clothes on their backs. Sometimes we take that for granted too. We want to thank you for these men who sacrificed, and all you other veterans out there who willing to serve. Willing to serve. You know, wonder what this world would be like if more people were willing to serve. Dear Father God, we thank you for all the blessings